on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review, and this is our now twice weekly show where we review the Magic stories. That won't last forever, but we're here. And this week we are here continuing our reviews of the Streets of New Capenna stories with the main stories. Episode 2, Dirty Laundry by Elise Kova. My quick review at the top is I enjoyed this one. I thought it had a good mix of action, relevant characters, and kind of characters that we haven't seen in a while, and like interest and intrigue and etc. So I enjoyed this one. I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, I liked it a lot too.
We'll have plenty to talk about with it, of course, and I'm sure you can see the timestamp below because, you know, we definitely just always have short videos, and this one's just an outlier. But if you have not gotten a chance to read this story for yourself, and that quick review sounds interesting to you and you want to read it instead of just hearing our summary of it as well as the review, the top link in the description down below will take you right to this story so that you can read it for yourself, or if you need to remind yourself of it, whatever the case may be, if you want to go there, top link down below will take you there so that you can check that out for yourself. Before we get on to the full review itself, just as we always tend to do, hi, welcome to our channel. Thank you so much for being here. We hope that you're enjoying all the things that we're doing here on this channel. We also have other channels linked down in the description box below, Video Games for All and Gluten Free for All, and we're doing great things over on both of those channels as well. So please don't forget while you're on any of them to subscribe and ring that bell so that you will get notified whenever any of our videos come out, and if you're on this channel, you'll get notified whenever we go live, which is every Monday and Friday from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time right here on this channel. So yes, Friday, the day after this video comes out, you will be able to watch us live starting at 8 p.m. where we will be continuing our playthrough of X-Men Legends 2 Rise of Apocalypse on the PlayStation 2. We are getting towards the end, so you're definitely not going to want to miss it. It's been an absolute blast. And on Mondays, by the way, when we stream MTG Arena. This past week, we had a lot of fun. We did pretty well, because 2 weeks ago, or last week, I suppose, we did not. And that was kind of an outlier. Thankfully, we've been doing pretty well, knock on wood, with this set, with Kamigawa. And we had a little bit of fun in the Ravnica Mixer this past Monday as well. So we typically do limited, but sometimes other things as well. It just depends on what we feel at the time and what the viewers want, because we asked this week, this past Monday, if people wanted us to try the Ravnica Mixer or not, and people were very interested, and so that's what we did. So, yeah, you can come out and...
Really well. We really did.
Yeah, 6 and 3.
But I was surprised, especially since you didn't think that the two sets that they were sort of melding together would necessarily meld particularly well. True,
I didn't. You're absolutely right. Yeah, it worked out quite nicely, and I was happy about it. I was a fan. So yeah, you can check out that VOD if you're really interested. But otherwise, we would love to just have you come to the streams. You can have your voice heard, and most of the time we talk about stuff that's not at all relevant to what's actually happening on the screen. So you can come and just tell us how your week's been, etc. Whatever you want to do, we're here for you. So thank you for any and all support that you give us. We really, really appreciate it. The things that we're doing over on Video Games for All are incredible recently as well. I think it has consistently as well, but based on the feedback and stuff that we've been receiving from people have really been enjoying Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, Pokemon Sapphire, Amy's first journey through the 3rd generation of Pokemon, and Final Fantasy VII. That has been very widely acclaimed, even before the Phoenix Wright series and Pokemon Sapphire started. So you should definitely go check out that stuff over on Video Games for All. Really, really good. Anyway, enough of that. Thank you truly for that support. It goes a long way. Likes and shares on videos and streams, massive help if that's something that you feel and you agree with and something you want to do. We really appreciate it. So, on to the full review itself. This story is Elspeth. Top to bottom, it's Elspeth, which is great. I mean, that's nice. It's nice to see. Because we had her, like, again, kind of bookending the first episode, right? Because the way we do these reviews is the way that they release them, which is main story 1, side story 1, main story 2, side story 2, etc. But the last time we did a main story review, so last week, it was Elspeth at the beginning of the story, Elspeth at the end of the story, and again, we complained that, like, you know, we didn't really get much.
It's Elspeth, and they're not going to explain her story, and blah, blah, blah.
And they did a bit here. A bit. right? They reminded us about Calyx. It unfortunately was nothing really more than we learned from the kind of card stories, except I guess the part about like Erebos helping like trap Heliod for a moment, and then Elspeth was able to escape because Erebos was so grateful for that or whatever.
I felt like they hadn't told us any of this stuff. And maybe it was just that I didn't remember, but I feel like I would have remembered.
The Calyx thing I knew somehow, right? Like it was from those stories or whatever, that Calyx was a construct of Clothis, the Gruul god, the new Gruul god, with since Xenagos was killed by Elspeth and Ajani working together, but mostly Elspeth. And so with Clothis coming up as the new god, she created a construct in Calyx, who then somehow gained a Planeswalker spark. If that has been revealed, I'm not sure how, but Calyx is called the Hand of Destiny because Calyx is now seeking Elspeth and trying to get her back to Theros, and specifically to the underworld of Theros, where he feels she belongs so that fate can be righted, basically.
Right.
And so she mentions that she's kind of on the run from him now, and how will she ever find peace, and blah, blah, blah. And we'll get into that, because there's a lot of discussion on that we really want to get into, because it's important.
Yeah.
We talked a bit about the world building, and specifically our feelings on the Planeswalker's Guide to New Capenna, or Streets of New Capenna, which we have not seen yet. Maybe at the time that this is out, we're filming this a little bit ahead of time, but maybe by the time this video's out, it's already come out, but as of yet, I haven't seen it. And we are always of the opinion that it should be in the story tab and it should be out before all the stories, because we should have that context to understand the plane a little bit better. For example, in this story, it mentions that New Capenna has a dome around it. I didn't know that.
Right.
Maybe I've seen it in some of the arts, but I think I just assumed that like that was a section of the city that might have been domed off for whatever reason. Maybe it was a greenhouse or something like that, right? I mean, I guess based on what Vivian said, probably not, because they don't really have that anywhere, but maybe Vivian just hadn't seen it. But there's a dome around it. That's just casually mentioned at the beginning of the story. That's brand new information for me.
Right.
Right? Maybe in the Planeswalker's Guide, it would have fully explained it as to why there's a dome and how it got built up from the ground up and what happened to the plane itself, or like the land itself, and why it's not really being used anymore. And so you have this
where
like
exactly it is and why it is exactly in that spot.
Exactly.
Everything else.
Yeah. So anyway, that was like very interesting to me, because you have like Elspeth kind of getting her bearings and kind of letting us know what she's been up to, really, with taking odd jobs here and there to try to like survive day to day, is the way that she puts it. And then, if you want to talk about survival, right, then we get to Dominaria, a flashback to Dominaria where she was a little bit earlier, because as we heard at the end of the last episode 1, Ajani was the one who had told Elspeth that New Capenna was her home, that he had figured it out, this was her home. And I had kind of surmised as they started talking to each other that that's kind of how that discussion was going to end, was with Ajani actually telling her that. And so we would see that, in addition to her just telling us, hey, Ajani told me this is my home.
Right.
Now we're going to hear how Ajani tells her that. I love Ajani, for folks who are unaware. I love Ajani so much. His and Elspeth's friendship is super important and great. There were moments here where I was very worried in the conversation that the two of them were having, where I thought that she was gonna like pull away from him and be like, shut up, you have no idea what the hell you're talking about, get away from me, and like go and like leave. Thankfully it didn't end up that way. Like it seemed like she was receptive to what he was saying, and like I said, we'll talk about this specific language because it was incredible. But I got super worried. I was like, please don't mess up this friendship. Like, I would have been upset if it was just like, well, they're new authors, they're coming in, and like this friendship is established, F it, let's throw it out the window. Like, I would have been very upset. And so I'm glad that they did it justice, credit where credit's due. So are you okay with talking about that? All right. So I wrote down some quotes here, or Amy asked me to write down some quotes here, which I was very happy to do, of course. Do you want me to just read all of it, or you want me to read like each bit and then you'll talk about it along the way?
Well, each bit.
Okay. So the first quote, these are all a Johnny speaking to Elspeth, unless I say otherwise. Elspeth, home is not a place. It's a feeling. It's the people who share your dreams and those whom you trust.
Oh, sorry.
That's the first bit. Sorry.
Yeah, so basically I had him write down all of the things that basically these remind me of when I had trauma group, and in trauma it was like the first or second time that we ever met.
Okay.
And like these, so it's like trauma group 101, like the stuff that you're learning in the beginning. We also did reframing of certain things, but like a lot of the stuff that we did in like the first 2 sessions was this kind of stuff. So it was like just listening to like a TED Talk. I don't think it was an actual TED Talk, but it was like some kind of lecture. But it was like a TED Talk, basically. And I can't remember who it was for the life of me. I feel like my therapist later on, when I referenced it to her, said it was Tara Brach, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't her.
Okay.
I think it was somebody else. But I don't remember who it actually was. But a lot of the stuff that was in there is the stuff that's right here. So it's just like, it's like legitimately, and it feels a lot like, not really cliche, but like just information dump, and kind of cliche, like this, like, you know, you expect it to be written on like a placard that you like hang up on your wall, like,
sure,
live, laugh, love.
Yeah.
You know, it's like that kind of stuff.
Right. Well, yeah, I think you're thinking of home is where the heart is. It's,
yeah.
it's
you know, whatever. It's that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But it's legitimately, when you go to trauma group, these were the things that we learned first.
Well, because they're cliche, but they're talked about because they're important. Like they're actual legit things, right?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Is that they're actually fundamental to starting the process. And when you initially hear them, maybe you don't really absorb them, but as you start going through the process, your mind will look back on those moments where you learned those things and say, oh yeah, okay, I remember when we went over that in group.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I can remember back that far and remember, okay, it was like the second session, or this was the first session. You know, I can remember those sessions because this is the stuff that everything else builds off of.
Yeah, and to give people context, your group started pre-pandemic at some point, right?
Oh, a while before the pandemic,
so,
yes.
But so, in other words, so...
It was like a year before the pandemic started.
Right, and so, because even though it was that long ago, there was a pandemic in between, which God knows it doesn't matter how long the pandemic actually was.
Right.
You know,
because everyone sort of experienced it as a different length.
And again, I'll rephrase, as long as quarantine was, because let's in no way insult anybody by saying the pandemic is over. But,
because it's really not.
No. But that actual lockdown and quarantine, whatever you want to call it, that part of like everyone needs to stay home, that part is mostly done. And so that period of time being like, you know, being locked away or whatever. Absolutely. That it's that strongly in your memory from even that long ago, compounded on top of the lockdown, is pretty interesting as well.
So that first line, I'll just let you keep going.
You want to do the next? You want me to do the next one, or you want me to? Okay. So Johnny again. I am at home wherever I go, because I am foremost at home in my own fur.
Yeah. So, between the first line and this one, it's, it's just telling Elspeth, you can't just look for a place that's home. You need to understand how to incorporate the connections that you have with others and to things as well. It's not just saying material objects mean nothing, right? It's saying that, yes, your home means something not just because of the relationships that you have with your family, right? But also your connection to the home as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just about the place that you live, it's about, or just about the people that you live with. It's a combination, as well as then the extra component, which is the hard component, at least for people who have been through trauma, which is yourself. You're also part of that home, because those connections don't exist and or are broken if you're not part of it, right? So it's just really about figuring out how to connect all of those dots, and then being able to kind of step back and appreciate those connections of those dots.
Okay, sure. I can understand that.
So he's saying, like, and he'll say at the end of the quote or whatever, I found your home for you. I did this. We
didn't write that part down, but yes.
We found it. Yeah. Okay. This is the location.
Yeah, yeah.
But finding the location isn't going to fix your problem. We found the location, so that's the first point. So now, and you're saying, I'm always at home no matter where I go. Yes, because me. So point 1 is New Capenna. Point 2 is Elspeth.
Yeah.
Right? Point 3 is Ajani. Because he's her family.
Mm-hmm.
So those 3 things combining is what's going to create a home for her, yeah. Right? And missing those things, without the shelter and the safety of the location, she doesn't have a home. Without the love and commitment and trust that she has with Ajani, she doesn't have a home. And without the love and trust that she has for herself, she doesn't have a home. So she needs to triangulate that. So what he's saying is, yeah, we have point 1.
Yeah.
But points 2 and 3 matter too. They also have to be there.
Well, and she brings it up. I mean, we talked about symbolism, and I don't know why we didn't actually write this quote down, but we didn't. But she brings up at one point, she kind of like touches her chest or her sternum, right, or her torso, and says that there's still a void that's left by where she was stabbed by God's End, by Heliod. And that she thought, just exactly what you were talking about, she thought that coming back to New Capenna would have filled a bit of that void, but she doesn't feel it yet.
Right.
Like, she's not feeling it refilling yet. And, I mean, maybe, and or it's likely, because those other 2 points or any other points that may be missing have not been connected properly yet. And so it's not just, well, I'm here, this is my home, fill me up with happiness now.
Right.
Like, that's not how it works, unfortunately, right? That would be super easy and nice.
Yeah.
There's a little bit more work involved, so.
Right, and I think that's kind of the misconception about what happiness is people think happiness is something that you get when you don't have to work for it. Happiness is something that you get when you're done with the work part. And that's not real. Happiness only happens when you're willing to do that work and push toward it indefinitely. And there will be times where that work becomes not work anymore. And it's just moments where you're able to just enjoy what has occurred for you. But those don't come without the work being done first and without you going back to it. Because it's not the kind of thing where you just work hard to be happy and then for the rest of your life from that point on, happiness is what you get to experience.
Yeah, you cross that line and now you're over there forever. Congrats.
It's not like that.
No, unfortunately not.
Everything's cyclical, right? So you start off on this journey and you come to the top of the crest and you get to sit there comfortably and be grateful and just enjoy. And then at some point you come back down, and that work is what's going to get you back up the other side. Mm-hmm. And so, like, knowing that and being willing is a huge part of it. When your process, or when you find out, kind of, that that's your process, and you're unwilling to do that work, or to make that commitment, that's when all this avoidance comes in. Mm-hmm. All of this Elspeth not listening to a Johnny, running away. And you could probably also compare that to being a planeswalker a little bit. Like, you know, these people are experiencing a traumatic event and they're planeswalking away.
Yeah.
It's too much for them to handle in that moment. And a lot of times it is. But when you're able to actually go through it, be in it, and do the work, you can get to a point where you're at the top of that crest. But like I said, you're not going to stay there. You have to come back around. So it's work and it's commitment, but as long as you can have faith in the work that you're doing, and you can have the strength to do it, because it takes a lot, happiness is a thing you'll get to experience many times. Not once. You know, not once and then from then on.
Yeah.
Many times. Which is what will make it worth it. Because when you're on that crest and you forget what it used to be like, is when you'll fall back down. Mm-hmm. And then you'll remember, and you'll work, and you'll care, and you'll have faith in the process, and you'll get back up there.
Kind of like, you mean like if you accidentally like, take it for granted while you're up there or whatever, and then you kind of dip back down?
Well, take it for granted, not
I guess that's
really.
a way of doing it, but it doesn't have to be the only way.
Right. But I just mean, like, you're enjoying it until you get to a point where you're maybe not enjoying it as much anymore. Because it's a little bit more the norm instead of this amazing thing that's happening.
Okay.
And then once it starts to become the norm and you're not appreciating it as much and you're forgetting how it feels to be constantly trying to push that boulder up that mountain, that's when you'll roll down the mountain and you'll have to start pushing it back up.
Okay.
It's not an accusatory thing. It's not you're being a bad person by not appreciating it. It's an inevitability of human nature.
Yeah.
Sorry. Keep going.
Don't be sorry. So yeah, the next line, because then Elspeth, this is where I was a little worried, because Elspeth kind of gets upset with him, right? And that's fine. For friends, that can happen, right? You can be like, okay, I don't really appreciate what you're saying to me right now. I just can't hear it, or I don't want to, or whatever. And so she kind of calls him out, and she's like, it's easy for you, whatever, but you just don't get it. And one of the things that he says in response to that is, I might not understand the depths of your pain as acutely as you might hope.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay, that was the end of that line. Then he says, I don't have to know every nuance of your suffering to see the wound and want to help you mend it.
Yeah, so that's sort of in reference to, well, I can't seek support from someone who hasn't been through what I've been through because they won't understand.
Yeah, inherently they just can't get it.
And the reality of it is that suffering is suffering. And people ought not judge severity, really, of suffering, because what the body does when it is suffering is the same. So if I'm suffering because I grew up in an abusive home, and you're suffering because you were bullied as a kid, or maybe my friend is suffering because their relative died. I can be a support system for you and for my friend, and vice versa, because it's about the empathy of being able to sit there in that person's suffering with them without it having to be about you having gone through the exact same thing. Because suffering is suffering. And suffering causes pain. And pain is something that everyone gets. Everyone understands pain because there's something that's caused pain for them, whether it be emotional or physical. So it's about being able to care about somebody else's suffering and realizing that they're no different from you. They're no better or worse than you. And they're going to, if they've been through something, they can sit there with you and help you through it and help you figure it out. And there are times where you need to be alone and just in it, right, in order to work through whatever that is. But there are other times where you need to have somebody there to keep you from just being swallowed by it, or to support you and just like help you get out of it so you don't waste 2 days or whatever just being in a funk. You know, I rely on Joe for that kind of thing a lot. I don't expect him to understand the nuances of what happened in my household that was an abusive home, you know, but he's still able to do that for me. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense.
I mean, I think so, but I live it, so, you know, it's a different situation, I suppose.
So, but I live it too, so I'm saying
Yeah.
we live it so I can explain to you that this is how it is.
Yeah, I guess I'm just saying, if for whatever reason it's not as clear, we are more than happy to answer any questions you might have, clarifications you might need, whatever. That's another thing that the comments down below are for. They're for lots of things, and we want to hear your thoughts on anything that we're talking about. But if you have clarification questions or whatever, or you want to share something, whatever you feel, let us know. That's what the comments are for. Go for it.
Yeah, but of course, like, the, you know, being able to be in the trauma group made a huge difference in me being able to learn that, right? Mm-hmm. Because now I had access to people who actually understood the nuances of what I had been through, to a point, because no one truly wholly can, right? Because no one else was there in your particular point of view.
Right. That even other trauma sufferers still don't know your trauma.
Right.
Yeah.
But so being able to be exposed to other people with that very similar situation helps get you to a point where you can learn that those aren't the only people who are able to support you in your recovery process.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'll say, you know, we've done some work with grief or grief sufferers. And I'll say there's definitely not one right way of doing stuff like that, but there are certainly some wrong ways. And so, you know, just be there for them, be attentive, etc. And, you know, there's, like I said, there's no right way there, but there are some pitfalls, so. But
it's a lot easier to do that for somebody if you start with the baseline of caring enough.
Yeah, 100%.
That gets you so far, right? Because even if you don't have any answers and you don't have any way of helping this person, what you don't realize is that you care and that you listen is what's helping them.
Yeah. The next part of what he says, don't let the demons of your past consume you.
Yeah, that's just basically like the kind of thing where we've talked about this in previous JaARs where you just get so stuck in the past. You get so stuck in that frame of mind that's so closed off from knowing the truth about just what the world actually is. And when you're there and you're stuck like that, you're just perpetually living in your past. Not even realistically the past, you know, it's your past.
Yeah.
And you're just stuck in it because it's like the deepest hole. It's the deepest hole that there ever is. And so, like, getting out of it just seems like completely insurmountable, right? But, like, knowing that there's a world at the top to come out to, that there are people up there who are going to toss ropes down or yell down to you and just talk to you, or maybe, like, throw down a bag of chips or something. Like, those are the things that are going to get you through being stuck down there, right? So, like, having the knowledge of knowing that you're in the hole and that the hole is a hole and that there's a top somewhere, even if you can't see it, and that there are other people and things up there waiting for you to come out, is how you survive being down there. So.
Yeah. And then the last line, which is a larger thing, and it's kind of the end of this section of what he talks about, and then there's one line from the next time that we go to Dominaria earlier in that section. But the last line that he says, you ready for it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Home will come from within when you've reclaimed your purpose. Look inside and trust yourself. If you don't, you'll never become who you are truly meant to be. You will never find peace, and there is no home if you cannot find contentment with yourself.
Yeah, so this one's interesting because it's talking about purpose, as though purpose is the way to finding home. When in those tutorials or those TED Talks or whatever, realistically it's the opposite. So finding home gives you purpose. So you can't acquire the purpose until you have the home. So he's kind of saying it backwards, but it's kind of the same thing, right? It's like I said, those connections, that triangle. And once you have that triangle, that's your home, but your home is actually just your foundation, right? So your home is the foundation, and then you can build upon that with more things. Now, one of the ways in therapy that you learn what your purpose is, or how to acquire one, or how to be able to ultimately find it, is competencies. So they'll go through the things that you're capable of with you and remind you that you're capable of those things so that you can build that on top of your foundation. And that's, once you've built it up enough, is when you get to that purpose. And unfortunately, that's a very fortunate scenario. But unfortunately, in that scenario, the things you're building on top of that foundation, for some people, it could be very few things before getting to that purpose. And for other people, it could be a very large amount of things before getting to that purpose. So maybe here what he's really saying is that what he's calling purpose is really that commitment to hard work that I mentioned before. So your purpose is your commitment to doing the work. And when you commit to doing the work, you can create the foundation. And then you can put in more work to build on top of the foundation, and then you'll ultimately find your purpose. But before you get to that point, you need to have a purpose or something that will keep you going or something that will give you hope to continue and give you faith in the process of doing the work, which is the commitment to doing the work. So your first purpose is the commitment to doing the work, and then your ultimate purpose is what you learn about yourself from having done so much work.
Right.
And then once you're there, then you're in that perfect circle where you know that you can sit on top of that crest for a while and enjoy your life and really be capable of being grateful for what you have. And then you'll come back down and you'll do the work and you'll get back up there. But that circle's so much bigger and messier and lumpier when that foundation doesn't exist. So once you establish that and you start building stuff on top of it, it'll like hone your circle, you know? So, yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, if it needs to be said, we really enjoyed that section of the story. Because it wasn't even that large of a section, but it was super important. I mean, just the fact that we're finally getting something with Elspeth, right? She's a very popular character, probably some people's favorite.
Yeah, for sure.
And she was...
Probably a lot of people's, yeah.
Right. And I was going to say through no fault of her own, as if she has free will to control how these stories are made. But
once she has her purpose, Joe.
But through no fault of her fans, right? And the people who love her character, she didn't get a story. She just didn't. And so the fact that now we're getting something, and it's something great, and it's a Johnny even, right? That's awesome. Because a Johnny is a great character.
Yeah. One of your favorites.
my favorite Planeswalker is a Johnny, absolutely. And this story did great things with him, right? And it used him to help her. It used him to give you a little bit of an insight into what the Gatewatch is doing with regard to the Phyrexians, right? Karn gets brought up a couple of times because of it, and so Johnny was used well here, I think. I would not be surprised if he doesn't come up again in these stories, because he's not really needed anymore past this point. You know, I would be happy if he is brought up, but I don't need it. I think they did a great job with what he did here. And then we get into, like, Elspeth kind of being back on her own in New Capenna, and she's got her job at the cleaners. It's whatever random day job she has, and she's going to be lifting things. Like, that's, you know, she's picking the bags up and loading them and whatever.
She picks things up and puts them down.
Basically. And her boss is an asshole, and to her. And
Again,
then...
pretty standard.
Yeah, and at first you're like, oh, good, somebody is kind of putting him in his place. Because she hears that he's, like, really scared. But then she steps out and realizes it's 4-on-1 and it's enforcers against this guy who's, like, not paying up properly.
Right.
And it's like...
It's the mob.
Yeah, and it's like, he doesn't deserve this. So Elspeth, properly as a hero, steps in and says, okay, that's enough. And this is a bit in-depth, so I'll try to do it quickly. We worked at a camp. And the camp has kids involved. And so one of the things that we discussed when we were training for how to be staff members at the camp was making sure that the kids are safe. I mean, obviously, like, whether it be things that they're doing or if we come across something that seems like an unsafe situation. And if they and I won't go too in depth because that's not really appropriate and that's not really what we're talking about here, but I'm sure people can surmise what I'm getting at. But there's a situation that says, we are the staff members. And you had staff members ranging from Amy to me. You had young kids. You had older, bigger people, more muscular, less muscular. You had all different ranges of staff members. And you needed a sweeping policy that could handle all of those different individual people. And so what you were supposed to do, the rule, is that if you see...
With all different types of capabilities, like all different types of things that they're good at.
Right. Whether it be something more physical, whether it be something more intellectual, whether it be whatever the case may be. And so what the broad rule was for everyone was if you come across a situation that is unsafe, a child is in an unsafe situation perpetuated by another. I'll try to be as polite as I can. What you are to do, no matter who you are, staff member-wise, and no matter what your sensibilities or your capabilities, you are to yell and get their attention and say, I'm aware, I see what's happening, and I'm going to go get help. I'm going to tell somebody what's happening. Because the idea is, one, it will stop, right? That's immediate. But then likely they will then, the perpetrator will change their focus to you. And so you're helping that child who likely in these situations is defenseless and definitely innocent and etc. And you get to abscond. And that's to a degree what Elspeth does here. There's 4 people beating on one dude.
Right.
And she doesn't have a weapon. God's End is gone. And we find out more about that as the story goes on because we've seen these story spotlight cards. We talked about that equipment last night that we saw. Which is the story spotlight card, and it seems awesome. But she doesn't have one right now. And so how the hell is she going to take on 4 people? She's not. At first, what she does is she kind of berates them, if you will, and says, I see what's going on. You're going to stop now. And they're like, oh, really? We're going to stop now? And she's like, yeah, and kind of insults them and then runs away. And what do? She says, great. They've stopped killing him, right? If this keeps going on, he's going to die.
Yeah.
So I've stopped that. Now they're coming after me. I'll have to deal with that on my own, but she just runs away.
Right.
Because she can't take 4 of them on, especially in an enclosed space like that.
Right.
Once she gets cornered, she figures out, she has to do something, but that's a different story. But she does what that broad sweeping policy was. No matter what her capabilities were in that moment, she saved that man's life by removing the threat from him in the immediacy. Right? He's going to need medical attention, but he's not dead. He's not just straight dead or continuing to be beaten on.
Right. And they're also not beating anyone else as they're chasing her.
Right. I mean, she kind of is a little hard on herself because they're kind of shooting magic at her with their little finger guns that we see in some of the other cards as well. Right. And that any of them that she dodges could have hit any innocent bystanders around her. And she's not happy that that happened. But again, she did what was best for her in that moment. And what I'll say is, that part was great. I don't have any quotes from that, but I enjoyed the descriptive language that was used. It was a good fight scene. It really was. A good jaw-jacking moment between them in the cleaners, then a good chase scene, the descriptions, and then a good actual fight once she gets cornered. And so I enjoyed that part. I thought it was great, and I wrote that down as well. Then, when she dispatches these 4 enforcers, or what we find out are would-be enforcers, but Angelo is back. Mm-hmm. And we see him for the first time since the first story. So, we saw him in the last one, now we see him here. I will say, the first story was very clearly about Xander, not about Angelo.
Right.
Because Angelo is so much cooler in this story than he was given a chance to be in the first one. Mm-hmm. And again, that's not because they didn't respect him in the first one. It's just that Xander was supposed to be the more impactful presence in that first story because he's the boss. And now once Angelo is out and about, right? I mean, we were introduced to him as an assassin, a vampire, right? but he's a good talker, right? He's a very good kind of manipulator, right? Elspeth isn't being manipulated, and she says she's not being manipulated, but she also kind of acknowledges that it's a little bit manipulating in that, like, he's basically giving her exactly what she wants, telling her exactly what she wants to hear, and yet she's fully going along with it because to her, in her opinion, it's a means to an end. She's going to get what she wants, so she'll let him sweet talk her in like that and tell her what she wants to hear because she has her own ulterior motives there. And it obviously remains to be seen who comes out on the better end of that, kind of getting more of what they want. But still, it was cool that we got to then see more of Angelo as well. And that art of him is really sick.
Yeah, I love it.
A lot of the art in this story was great. Really good. And that's not to take away from the arts from the other stories, but this one I felt impacted me more than the other two that we've done so far for this set have. Just in terms of how like flashy and interesting the art was. I liked it a lot. But the cityscapes have been incredible in all of the stories. The cityscapes are great.
But also how badass the art was on this one too.
Yeah, really cool.
Like you said, cityscapes are not going to be as impactful as, vampires and demons.
Yeah, I was going to say that shot of Obnixilis at the end, holy crap.
Yeah, I just
reflected
didn't
in
want
the
to say
window.
that since we hadn't gotten to him yet.
It's fine.
But yeah, I mean, that's going to be so much more impactful because you're just going to be like, whoa, Then, a cityscape is beautiful, but it's beautiful. That's kind of the long and short of it.
Yeah. Then we hear a bit more when Elspeth is walking with Angelo and he's kind of presenting to her some options of what she can do and kind of offering her a job. She notices a fountain with a statue. And the statue is of an angel fighting something. And she references the fact that Angelo probably doesn't know what the hell she's fighting, but she knows, and we know, we all know, it's a Phyrexian. Now, I always thought, not that I always thought, I had forgotten. I misspoke when we were talking about it, right? Elspeth's Nightmare is the card I'm thinking of from Theros Beyond Death, the saga, that shows Elspeth kind of in this relief or sculpture.
Yeah, it's like a black stone.
Yeah, carving or whatever.
Yeah, or like a slate almost sort of look to it.
Yeah, and there's this presence above her with this big maw, and it's this terrifying creature, and she's looking up at it and kind of seemingly frozen in fear. Obviously, it's a still image, so you don't know if she's just looking at her or if she's actually frozen in fear. But it's called Elspeth's Nightmare, so I kind of added my own little flavor there. For some reason, I was like, oh yeah, that was from her homeworld. It wasn't. It was from her first planeswalking. Or from when she was planeswalking, she dealt with the Phyrexians at one point, but a Johnny informs her, because Angelo talks about it a bit with this thing of the angels did a thing, and we're supposed to be grateful for it, even though they left us with all this, right? So I guess I answered my own question from before, in that the Phyrexians were probably what ruined the world down below, right? If their black ooze or whatever is down there, you can't really live on that place. So they put up the girders and built up, and that's where the city is. That's my feeling. And I would say it's a guess, but it's probably not that far of a stretch.
Right.
But Elspeth learned from a Johnny that the Phyrexians had been to New Capenna, or I guess at that point, Old Capenna, and they'd been fought off, right? Because as a Johnny puts it, Capenna is still standing. And so because Capenna is still standing, they fought off this threat once before. So now Elspeth is trying to figure out how that happened. And so that's why she's willing to work with the maestros, because their museum has a lot more of these statues, all of the rest of these statues or whatever, as Xander says, and have a lot more of their historical records and etc., so that Elspeth can find out, hopefully, more information on the angels fighting the demons, or fighting the Phyrexians, excuse me, and how they vanquish them, how they manage to win that fight without losing the plane in the process. And I always find it interesting, this is me personally, Amy's more the history person here, but from working at that camp that we talked about, there are a lot of places at that camp, because it's run by a charity organization, right, or a charitable organization, and so it's not really a for-profit place, right? So a lot of the things around that that property are donated, and so when they're donated, much like in a hospital or a school or whatever, it's someone's name, right? It's going to be whoever's family or they themselves donated money to have an area named after them. But just the same as we hear here from Angelo, many, many, many years later, you don't know why that person's name is on that building. Right. You just don't. And it's unfortunate, unless there's some type of placard, right? And sometimes that's a lot of money, or like, what the hell are you going to write on there that really expresses it well enough, right? A person that loved this place, or that really had a passion for cooking, and so this kitchen is named after them, right? Or they really appreciated learning about ecology, so this ecology lodge is named after them. But that was probably obvious from the fact that they had an ecology lodge named after them, right? So, and that kind of bothers me a bit, because I think we've talked about this before, but I worked at that camp for like 10 years, 10 summers. And I knew some of the people who were memorialized in those ways. And I knew that, come 10 years from now, maybe even now, those names don't necessarily mean as much to the people who are coming to those areas, because they don't know those stories. And hopefully those stories can continue to be passed down year after year so that people understand it, but otherwise it's just the name.
Yeah, but the point isn't so much that the legacy is the reason why they donated the money.
Sure.
The legacy is this thing that exists now has my name on it. And so my name is immortalized on this thing that exists now that will probably go on to exist for a long time.
That's right.
So that's the legacy. And if it's an ecology lodge, then you can feel proud of that because of all of the people who are going to learn ecology by going to that lodge that exists now.
Yeah. I just, of course, that's what it made me think of when we talk about, Angelo looking at the statue and being like, I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to care about that for, right? And it's like, that's so rude. These angels, probably died to help make sure that this world is still here, right. And especially fighting against the Phyrexians, which we know, and Elspeth knows, that's a big deal. It's kind of a big deal. And meanwhile, Angelo's like, whatever, I don't give a shit. It's like...
We're supposed to be grateful for what they left behind. Look at this mess.
Yeah. And it's like, dude, you should be grateful, and so that sucks, right? That hurts a little bit. But I get it, right? You just have to kind of, like you said, you have to realize that it is that immortalization regardless of whether or not an individual respects it or not. It is still a respectful thing. So I appreciate that.
I mean, it's not like he came over and vandalized it or something,
Right.
Right.
He's just verbally disrespecting it, which is not great,
just
but
ignorant to what it means, which isn't his fault. I mean, he just hasn't gotten to learn what the thing is about.
Yeah. So,
why would he care about it?
Mm-hmm. And then to go back to what you were talking about before, the last impactful line that Ajani says, because we go back to Dominaria earlier, so it's another flashback, another line, or the last line from Ajani here that we wrote down. You've accomplished so much, Elspeth. If you can fight all that, then you can also fight for yourself and find the security you're looking for within you.
It's that circle. If you can create that foundation, and you can put in that work, you'll come to that crest. It will exist.
Well, and it's, it's also, it's interesting, right? Because for this story, he's talking about, well, you killed a god, died, and came back from the dead. So he says you've accomplished so much. But notice...
Those are some competencies if I've ever heard of any.
But notice what Amy wanted written down. Not the you've killed a god. Not the you've come back from the dead. You've accomplished so much, Elspeth. Because replace Elspeth with your own name, if that's something that you'd like to hear. Right? You've accomplished so much, Amy. You've accomplished so much, Joe. If you can fight all that, any of those adversities, I was going to say adversaries, I guess that too, but any of those adversities in your life, if you can fight all of that, then you can also fight for yourself and find the security you're looking for within you. So, yes, it's a lion man talking to a woman who's come back from the dead. But it could be said to anyone, from anyone, and still be just as true.
And has been and will be.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of, going back to the fantasy aspect of the thing, then the demon comes out. And we just get,
He says, I'm going to make it harder for you to fight.
As is appropriate, right? Last story, we had the bookend of Elspeth, right? And then this story was Elspeth. So now this story is not bookended, but it's ended with the epilogue of Ob Nixilis. And it very much reminded me, right? I'm a big Marvel fan. What a surprise. Come watch our X-Men playthrough on X-Men Legends 2 on Fridays. But it reminded me of the scene at the end of... Oh God, Thor: The Dark World, maybe? The scene, whatever the scene after the credits was in that one Marvel movie where Thanos shows up and is like, all right, whatever, I'll do it myself, and puts his hand through the gauntlet, and that's it. He has the gauntlet now. Right. And that's the end of that scene, that's the end of the movie. But it's just that idea of like, don't forget, this guy's still here, he's a looming threat, and now we know how that all turned out, right? If you've been following along with the movies, but it's that idea of like, he's coming, don't worry, right? There wasn't enough information about him here, but still, he's still coming. And it really, that's all it was. It was him like, oh, we're gonna get that font, like they're just asking for it to be taken, right? Here, let me pour some Halo out and pass it around and ha ha ha. And that's the end. Yeah. That's the end of it, because that's all you need.
It's just posturing, basically.
Yeah. But again, that's sick ass art too.
Yeah.
Like, it looked amazing, it looked intimidating as hell. And then the story ended. And that's just fine. It's just fine.
Right.
So, yeah, that is the end of this particular episode, right? You don't have anything else?
No.
I liked the story a lot. I thought it was great. One, it evoked a lot of things, and it talked about a lot of like lessons that you could learn and etc. with all the Ajani stuff, but it also helped set up for the future, right? You got to see where Elspeth is going, why. You got to see Ob Nixilis a bit and remind you, and in fact, you found out, I knew this already because I was spoiled a bit by looking at the cards, but now you found out he was the adversary that was being talked about in the first story.
Which we didn't know.
Right, technically, yeah. Like I said, because I read this, or we're reading this after the fact, I saw the card, Ob Nixilis, the adversary, right. So it was like, when they talked about the adversary, it was like, huh, I know who that is, right? But yes, you're right. You had no idea in the first story. They just say the adversary. It's like, who the hell is that going to be? It could have been Tezzeret again, right? It could have been, it could have technically been Urabrask, I suppose. But regardless, yes, it's, Jesus.
That's just me, like,
I know.
pondering.
I wonder. But yeah, so it turns out it's Ob Nixilis. He has this little cabal or whatever. And, that's it. I'd like to say, please don't forget, anybody, that coming to these videos, reading these stories for yourselves, reading just that section, just those quoted sections from Ajani, and being able to maybe help yourself in your own life, or maybe now you have an idea of how you might want to try to help a family member or a loved one who is dealing with something like that or whatever. That is what stories should do. They should help you to learn and etc. and grow. And so in doing that, here with magic stories of all things, right? Again, a woman who fought a god or killed a god and came back from the dead. That is a great way, reading those stories and learning those things, is a great way for all of you to join us as we show off our...
Hashtag Vorthos Pride.
That's right. I really hope everybody enjoyed this video as well as the story itself. We would love to hear from you about anything that we talked about today or anything that we didn't talk about. Maybe there was something that you thought was super important in the story that we missed. Let us know in the comments down below. Chat with us and your fellow viewers. Keep the conversation going. We really appreciate each and every one of you being here, as you always are. We are enjoying these stories now, right? We had a bit of an issue with the first side story. We talked about that in the last one. And if you missed that, you can probably check that out. It'll be on the channel somewhere. So definitely go check that out. And I'll probably have the, now that we're like 3 in, probably have the playlist up soon enough. But so, you know, keep your eyes peeled for that too, and you'll be able to see it. But we will be back on Monday for the second side story. So stay tuned for that, and then in a week, we'll be back with the third main story. So definitely stay tuned. Don't forget our streams Monday and Friday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Next Friday, the 22nd, which is the Streets of New Capenna pre-release, we will not be streaming. If I didn't mention that before, I was supposed to, so I'm sorry. We will not be streaming that night, so don't come here looking for the stream, but stay tuned. If you have that bell rung, you'll get that notification as soon as it comes out, because we will be at the pre-release, as we are all the time for many, many sets now, at our sponsor store, Champion Card Collector in Poughkeepsie, New York. We are super excited because we're going to be there. We're going to get pre-release kits. We're going to open them on camera. We're going to show them to all of you. If you want MTG Arena codes, that's where you come and get them. Let's get all mobby about it. That's where the code's on. So you can come out and check that out for yourselves. We'll be giving those codes away. You can get to see those cards. If maybe you can't get out to an event near you, or you don't necessarily feel safe doing so.
We'll have like a trench coat on, and then we'll like open it, and it'll just be codes.
You got some codes? If you don't necessarily feel safe, or you're not able to get out to an event near you, live vicariously through us. We're happy to do that for you, with you, etc. You can, again, get in the comments of those videos. Talk about what you thought of the cards, how they look, etc. Maybe what you've opened either on Arena or in person. And we can compare and contrast, etc. I think it's going to be an awesome weekend, that weekend for us. Hopefully it is for you as well. Since we talked about it and since I mentioned the term, as always, we don't say it as much here, but we mean it all the time. Yeah. But we say it at the close of our streams. We hope that you are all continuing to stay safe and happy and healthy. That's for you and your loved ones that we talked about earlier. So please continue. It's super, super important. We care about you a lot, and it's not because, well, then you won't be able to watch our videos. Irrelevant. We want you to be all of those things. It's super important. So please continue to do so. We would love to have you back for any and all videos that you want to check out here on this channel, here on our other channels, Video Games for All, Gluten Free for All, link down in the description box below. They'll be popping up here on the screen in a second too. So feel free to click, subscribe, ring the bell, all that good stuff. And we will see you in the next whatever. So thank you all so very much. That is the end of this particular episode. And for now, from us here at the Geek for All family of channels, I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.